Anyways, comparing in-game settings to a marriage, all that to say, stop overthinking everything. What's good? In this video, I'm going to be teaching you guys how to improve your aim at whatever FPS game you're playing. I'm going to be using my experience from being a pro, the players that I've been around, the things that I've heard, things that I've seen, and just kind of cram it into this one video, and hopefully you guys can learn something and take away, a point or two. All right, to start off, we're going to go with tip number one, the most overlooked thing ever. Stop changing your sensitivity and your crosshair or your settings 24/7. I see guys all the time overthink every little thing, blame performance on their settings. I've been a total victim to this. I've seen so many guys that I've teamed with, people that I've seen online, just constantly blame bad performance on sensitivity or crosshair or settings or anything that has to do with changing numbers. The reason I say this is because how do you really expect to grow and reach your potential or reach your desired goal when you're constantly changing factors in your gameplay? It's like somebody who plays basketball. If they're consistently changing their form, changing the way they're shooting the ball, changing their shoes, how do they really expect to get comfortable and settle into a style that they're good with? Same thing applies for gaming and same thing applies for esports. If you're constantly changing your settings and changing those small factors, you're never gonna really settle in and figure out your style. Thinking back, I can't help but laugh, but remember guys online or even some people that I've teamed with in the past, they'll have a few bad games and they'll feel like they'll have to change their settings, and they do. They change their settings, but then they hit that honeymoon phase. They change their settings, they change their crosshair, and they're like, dude, and they're clicking heads, things are going well, things are feeling good, and they're talking as if they found, this perfect girl. Dude, I found the one. I found the settings, man. I think I got it. And then a week later, they have a few bad games, and then they feel like they gotta change it again. Okay, think about it. Changing your crosshair and your sense is like getting into a marriage. Hear me out. When you get married, you're in this honeymoon phase. Things are feeling good. Things are looking good. Things are just aligning perfectly, right? And it's the same thing when you change your crosshair, when you change your settings for the first time. You're clicking heads. Things are going well. You feel like you're just popping off. You feel like you found the one. Then honeymoon phase starts to fade away, and it's because you guys start to get to know each other a little bit better. You guys start to get comfortable. True colors are starting to come out. Same thing goes with the crosshair, man. You start playing with that same crosshair for weeks and weeks and weeks, you're gonna hit a wall, you're gonna hit a challenging period, and it's just a process you gotta walk through. It's not something you can skip over. It's not something you can turn away from. You just gotta power through it. Anyways, comparing in-game settings to a marriage, all that to say, stop overthinking everything. All right, tip number two, this should be commonly known. You guys should know this. I shouldn't have to say this, but I see some guys not doing this all the time. I've been a victim of this. I've been around guys who do the same thing. You need to warm up before you hop into a legitimate competitive match. If you're playing any FPS game, I don't care what role you're playing, I don't care what game you're playing, you need to be hopping into some type of warm up, at least 30 minutes. Doing things like aim labs. If you guys don't know what that is, I'll link it down below, but it's like an aim training type of game or program, whatever you want to call it. If you're playing Overwatch or Call of Duty or even Valorant, you should be setting up a custom lobby with bots and consistently practicing and warming up before you hop into game. It's crucial, it's super important, and it's a no-brainer. People in traditional sports do it. Everybody in esports should be doing the same thing. Think about it. When we were in school, or for those who are in school still, when your teacher wants to teach you something new, in math for example, he or she gives you a ton of homework. Reason being is because they want you to do repetition on repetition on repetition and see every possible question and scenario and situation. So this way, come test time, you know how to respond effectively. Same thing for gaming. If you're in a practice range or if you're in aim training, constantly practicing your flicks, practicing your 180s, constantly practicing your tracking. When you hop into a legitimate game, your brain is subconsciously gonna know how to respond to that certain situation. Repetition is key. And that leads into my third point, run drills. Repetition is the father of learning. I've heard that so many times and it applies to almost everything. And it's super helpful, it's super important. Think about it. When you look at traditional sports and when you look at esports, how do traditional sports teams improve? They either scrim against each other, their own team within their own team environment, but they're also constantly running drills over and over and over again. They're practicing threes, they're practicing crossovers, they're practicing rotations. But then when you look at esports, all these teams are just scrimming against other competitive teams, but they're mostly going into that competitive environment with the mentality of, I'm just gonna throw it out all on the table. I'm gonna do my best and we're just gonna play to win. No. That mentality is used for a match. It's not used for practice. Practice is I'm gonna hop into this environment knowing exactly what I'm gonna work on. I'm gonna work on my rotations. I'm gonna work on my aim. I'm gonna work on not dying as much. Not, I'm gonna go in and just give it all I got and hope to God we win. See, that mentality is used for a match. When you go into a match, you grab everything that you've learned in the past and you apply it and you give it all to that hour and a half, however long you're in game. To me, in my opinion, I still think that's a fundamental problem in esports today. Not a lot of teams are really changing this. Not a lot of competitive teams are running drills with other teams. Everybody's just like, hey, you want to scrim tomorrow at 2 p.m.? Yeah, sure. And then they play it like a match. It's not practice. All right, tip number 4. I'm sure this has been said before, but crosshair placement. What do I mean by this? In every game, there are character models with a certain height level, okay? So when you're in Overwatch or Call of Duty or Valorant, whatever FPS game you're playing, you guys should be hopping into custom game and understanding what the actual character model height is and putting your crosshair there by default when you're in the game. So when you're just walking or when you're rotating, when you're not really focused on shooting anybody, your crosshair is going to already be defaulted to that character model's height. So this way, if somebody were to come into your field of view, you won't have to readjust as much. Say you were below that level or above that level. Time and time again, I see amateur players or people of lower ranks just kind of throwing their crosshair wherever. Your crosshair should be defaulted to the vicinity of where that character model's height is constantly. All right, tip number 5. You really need to figure out your aim style and your aim movement. What do I mean by this? There's different types of aim styles. There's wrist aimers, there's people who pivot off of their forearm, there's people who pivot off their elbow. For me, it took me a while to figure it out, but I was most comfortable and best aiming from my wrist. So I would plant my wrist right on the edge of the desk and I would pivot from my wrist. But because I was a wrist aimer, I would adjust my sensitivity to that. Because I don't have that much range of motion with my wrist, I had to go higher with my sensitivity. In comparison to somebody who would pivot from their elbow, they had a wide range of motion so they can get away with a lower sensitivity. It all really depends on what you want. And some people will say you should use all 3. You should pivot from your wrist, your forearm, and your elbow, depending on the different movements that you're doing in the game. I agree with that as well, but I think to start off, you need to figure out which one you're most comfortable with and then work your way from there. Because when you get into a game, say you want to do a long range motion, or say you're looking to do just maybe a 180, yeah, you might want to pivot from your forearm or your elbow rather than your wrist. Pivoting from your wrist is usually used when you want to line up and aim at somebody's head. I'm sure you guys can take away at least 1 or 2 points from this video and apply it to your own gameplay and kind of increase your accuracy in game. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you're into it, subscribe, like the video, GG's in the chat, and I'll see you guys in the next one.